Welcome, scholars, again to another presentation in the series in history of the Christian Church. Today's topic is the zenith of papal power. And this is a time when papacy reached its highest authority ever experienced in history. And this is what will assume or take our attention in this lecture. May the good Lord bless our ability to explain and to understand. I have always wondered why the Pope or popes have received amazing attention even as late as in today's time and age. It's fairly clear to everybody that mainly, if not solely, only state presidents receive state reception when they visit a country and are under the highest security motorcades you can ever find. But I've always wondered, I have lived in many countries, Zambia, in the US, Zimbabwe. I have seen that each time the Pope has visited these countries, even countries that are as advanced or as complex as the United States of America, the Pope's visit is not a private one. It is one in which there is attention and there is probably the most heaviest complex security you might find. A picture such as I have shown on screen, which is obviously in Asia, you can tell by the writings on the motorcades, is a typical example of how a pope is received in countries around the globe. This is not just a one country reception. This is around the globe. One of the roles of history, and this is why I love history. History explains the present. Because many people, including myself, had wondered why the Pope, who is a leader of a church, and there are many leaders of churches. There are leaders who lead the Greek Orthodox Church, leaders of different denominations. There is none, not even one, who is close to the kind of reception the Pope receives even today. The Pope stands as the spiritual leader, as it were, on earth. I guess I don't have to wonder anymore because history explains why. Papal power reached its highest, its zenith, its highest influence between 1054 to 1305, a period of about 250 years. During that time, several popes came and reigned, but out of those that reigned, and the trend among those that reigned during that time was actually in asserting the power of papacy over the state, over every authority on earth. And that papacy managed to do. Now, it did so, not by all popes that reigned during that time, but two of the popes that actually led to that levels, one of whom was Gregory VII. Gregory VII is believed to have been born in 1015 and died in 1085. He was Pope, or he was in office as Pope from the 22nd of April, 1073, till his death in 1085. Of the two popes, or out of all the popes that reigned during that 250 years, of the highest influence of papacy, highest level of exercising papal authority, Pope Gregory VII is one of the two who demonstrated and proved that the Pope was the most powerful authority on earth. Gregory II, his birth name was Hildebrand, and when he was Hildebrand, before he became Pope Gregory VII, he actually worked very closely with papacy. About 20 years before he became Pope, which is from 1053 to 1073, Pope Gregory, at that time Hildebrand, served under 5 popes. That is, he had 20 years of serving very close as a cardinal, actually as an arch-cardinal responsible for treasury. Some of those 20 years. He was, by rank, very close to papacy. And during that time, this man exercised, even that time, the influence of leading or constructing the office of papacy towards being the highest authority on earth. He served under Leo IX, Nicholas II, and Alexander II, for example. And under Pope Nicholas II, Hildebrand helped pass the ecclesiastical legislation. The ecclesiastical legislation was an act or a legislation that took the power of electing the Pope out of the hands of laity or out of popular vote into the control of the College of Cardinals. Let me give a little background to this. Up until that time, the Pope was elected, or the Pope's elections was in the hands of laity by a popular vote. Hildebrand helped Nicholas II pass the ecclesiastical legislation that removed the power of the laity being responsible for the placement of a new pope into actually the College of Cardinals, which was a group of cardinals who were close to the Pope, who could then control and determine who the Pope would be. I guess what I'm trying to say, scholars, is that Hildebrand's influence, or Gregory VII's influence, did not start when he was in office as Pope. It began way before he was even Pope. There is a document in history that it's called the Dictatus Pauper. The Dictatus Pauper. This document was found among the letters of Hildebrand after his death. That is, this, when Gregory died, one of the documents that they found among his other documents and letters was this document, in which were written these things that historians have regarded as Pope Gregory's beliefs about the power of a pope. they are very strong assertion. He believed that the theocracy in which temporal as well as spiritual power would be exercised by the Pope as the vicegerent of God, meaning he speaks the theocracy, God, then comes the Pope as the one who speaks on behalf of God. He believes that no civil power should dominate the church, but instead the church is to control the civil power. That is, at that time, you had countries like France, England, Spain. He believed that civil powers could not dominate and should not dominate the church, but that the church should be responsible and control the civil powers. He believed the Roman church owed its foundation to God alone, that the Pope was alone to be called universal leader. And this statement is in the context of that time when you would have an emperor who would actually be responsible over an empire that goes beyond one state. Pope Gregory VII believed that the Pope alone could be regarded as a universal leader. He believed the Pope had full powers over bishops. As bishops were the junior officers that provided spiritual leadership in different dioceses around the different states. And he believed, because what used to happen was when a bishop would be working in Italy or in France or in England, there was confusion as to whether the king of England or the king of France or Italy had power over the bishop who were in his territory. Gregory believed only the Pope had full powers over bishops. He also believed only the Pope's feet are to be kissed by all princes. That the Pope could depose emperors. There had never been, he believed, in that document was found this statement, that there had never been error in the Roman Church, and that, according to the Bible, it would never err. Now, I share this so that it would give you an idea of the mindset that Gregory had, so that when he now took over papacy, you would not doubt why he asserted papacy in the way that he did. And so when he now became Pope in 1073 to 1085, some of the things that he did actually included these two significant acts. He abolished lay investiture. Lay investiture was a practice by which clerical leaders received the symbol of their office from the feudal lords, who was usually a lay person in their territory. Now let me restate that. And in contemporary world practice today, I would say the lay investiture was like the crowning or the coronation or the laying on of hands or placing on of authority on a church official who has been elected. It used to be that during that time, those bishops, those people in different countries, leaders of the churches, were being invested by the lay people, in this case, the feudal lords who were the leaders there, or the kings who were leaders there. When he became Pope, he abolished this practice and left it only in the hands of the clergy, that only a clergy person could do the investiture on a leader. Gregory II also collided in what I have regarded the Henry IV versus Gregory VII fight. It's a very interesting experience that Gregory went through when he actually went into a serious fight with Henry IV. Who was Henry IV? Henry IV was emperor of the Holy Roman Empire, residing in Germany. Now, there was a vacancy. Now, you need to keep this in mind. At that time, you remember we have passed through the Charlemagne era of the emperor over Rome, and now it had moved over to the Holy Roman Empire, based now in Germany by German emperors who were claiming emperorship over the Western territory of Europe. When the office of Archbishop of Milan was vacant, remember Milan is in Italy, then there's French there, but there's Germany there, and that whole territory was under Henry. When the office of Archbishop of Milan was vacant, Henry IV put Godfrey in that office. But the electoral body of Archbishop chose Otto. Now, here is a situation where the head of the state, the emperor, elects a person or puts a person in office. And you have to keep in mind, the Archbishop of Milan was a very, very influential office. He does that, but the electoral body of Archbishop chose Otto. Pope Alexander II recognized Otto and not Godfrey. Gregory VII recognized Otto, and actually now let me restate that. As I was explaining, the Henry IV elected a person, Godfrey, and put him in office. Another group, in this case, the electoral body of the archbishopric chose Otto. Now, here was Henry's response. Henry IV called a council that rejected the authority that had put Otto into the bishopric of Milan. What does Gregory do? Gregory deposed Henry and released all his subjects from alliance to him. And his own people told him that they would depose him if he does not get released from the Pope. In other words, when Henry refused and went into a confrontation with Gregory, Gregory deposed him. And in his papal or papacy authority, released all his subjects from allegiance to him and says, you don't have to obey him. And the people obeyed the Pope and told Henry that they would only follow him if he gets released or if the Pope again says, you are okay. So can you imagine now the situation in which Henry was put? Henry could now exercise his state authority over the Pope and win, or Gregory would stand his ground to show that the Pope is above even the authority of a state head. In the winter of 1077, Henry IV, his wife and his baby son crossed the Alps to meet Pope Gregory VII at Canossa. And Pope Gregory made him and his family stand in the cold snow for 3 days before he could admit him in his presence. In other words, look at this now. A king, a leader of a state, had to humble himself before Henry VII and travel in winter with snow, in cold. Him, his wife, and their baby boy son traveled, and when they got to Canossa, where the Pope was, the Pope did not even have the, shall I call it, courtesy or kindness of accepting him immediately in his presence, but he made him stand outside in the cold weather for 3 days, him and his wife, before he could admit him in his presence. And when he admitted him, then he released him from his excommunication. Now, when this happened, you can certainly tell how Pope Gregory II had now asserted papal authority over a king of a state. Now, I had indicated that there were two popes. There were two popes who had who demonstrated the highest influence and authority and control of papacy over the earth or over the states. The second one is Pope Innocent III. I must admit that if Gregory excelled and took papacy to a very higher level, Innocent III surpassed Gregory and just took it to a completely new, higher level. Pope Innocent III was elected in 1198 at the age of 37. He was educated in theology and law. It's interesting that this is one of the few very ably educated popes. He had a law degree from Bologna and a theology degree from Paris. This man, educated, equipped in the law and in theology, exerted now his leadership and asserted the authority of the Pope. Now, according to Innocent and his articulated beliefs as recorded in history, these are the claims that Innocent III made: that the Pope is the supreme authority on earth. Now, think about that. Think about that. Supreme authority, meaning there is no other authority on earth that's above the Pope. That's according to Innocent III. That kings and princesses or princes derive their authority from the Pope. Pope or popes could excommunicate, depose, or lay an interdict on kings. That God had given the successor of Peter, the Pope, that task of ruling the whole world as well as the church. Now, there's nothing that can be stronger than this, whereby Innocent III believed God had given the successor of Peter, who is the Pope, the task of ruling the whole world as well as the church. He believed more. He also believed the Pope stood above man and only below God. Now, this statement meant that the Pope was not equal to a man. He was above man, but only below God. He also believed and used this illustration that the state should relate to the church as the moon shines by the reflected light of the sun, meaning the state was to bask in the glory of the papacy and derive its power from the Pope. with these beliefs, Innocent III, when he became Pope in 1198 and reigned for all those years, he now went into implementing his convictions, asserting his convictions, pushing his convictions, and putting them into action. Here are his words now in action. His first demonstration of those convictions was with the King of France, Philip Augustus. When Philip's wife died, when King Philip's wife died, he married Ingeborg of Denmark. When he married Ingeborg of Denmark, she moved over to where he was. But when she came to his palace, Philip did not like her. And so he decided to divorce her and marry Agnes. Now, so far, what this means is a king, in this case, the King of France, or the head of the state of France, has an issue that is, in today's world, would almost view it personal. But because he was a Christian, and as a Christian, he fell under the authority of the Pope, and he was expected to exemplify or to uphold the morals. What does Innocent III do? Innocent III ordered him to put away Agnes and go back to Ingeborg. But you guessed correctly. Philip Augustus refused to obey the Pope or to obey Innocent III. Innocent III placed the entire France under an interdict in 1200 AD, which affected everyone in the nation because that interdict forbade every believer from meeting in churches. Yeah, he placed France under an interdict in which he commanded that there would be no meeting in churches. The territory was under papal interdict. People rose against Philip because people wanted to go to church and obey the Pope. What was the result? Philip had to suffer the humiliation of putting away Ingeborg and bringing back Agnes as his wife. Talk of power to control and to assert authority. This was one. When Pope Innocent III realized he had conquered the King of France, he now went to England. In other words, he turned his attention to England now, and he had a confrontation with John of England. Here is what happened with regards to how Innocent III went into confrontation with John of England. The position of Archbishopric of Canterbury became vacant. Of course, Canterbury being under the jurisdiction of England. John appointed a person, and Pope Innocent III rejected that person. When John refused to take decisions of Innocent III, the Pope excommunicated John and placed an interdict upon England in 1208. Now, you know about the interdicts by now. John was forced to humble himself and acknowledge in 1213 that he held his kingdom as the feudal vassal of the Pope and agreed to pay 1,000 marks annually to the Pope. Talk of authority, power, and control. Innocent had humiliated or put under his control Philip Augustus of France, and now John of England now could recognize that they were feudal vassals of the Pope, to the extent that John of England agreed to pay the fines put on him annually by the Pope. If you have followed what we've been, how we have come up with the narration of authority and power and territories, you would remember that at this time, the powers were in France, where they had a king. The powers were in England, and then obviously the powers were in Germany, which was under now the Holy Roman Empire. And Innocent III now went to face the Holy Roman Empire's emperor, Otto. And history says, in 1202, please disregard that, I'm living in 2020 today, so 2020 comes to the mind very quickly, but that is in 1202. 1202. Innocent III asserted the right of the Pope to approve or disapprove the emperor elected by the German electors of the empire. Now, what does that mean? Innocent III claimed that the Pope had the right to approve or disapprove who is appointed as emperor in the German or in the Holy Roman Empire. And guess what? Innocent managed to secure the election of Emperor Frederick II in 1212. And when there were challenges trying to come up from the local authorities, Innocent called on the armies of Philip II of France to come and use his military power to defeat Otto. And he did that. That is how much the Pope exerted his influence. Until now, if you can have that picture, there is France, the Frankish entire place. There is England, and there is the Holy Roman Empire, which included Germany, the Italy, all of it now, their kings or their heads of state had been humiliated or put under the control of the Pope. When he had done that, now he turned his attention to anyone who was an enemy of Christianity. So he now turned to crusade on Muslims. Again, it's very interesting to realize that the Fourth Crusade, which Innocent III led out, had for its goal to recover Palestine from the Muslims by capturing Egypt as a base for later actions. This crusade was instigated by Innocent III, but it ended up capturing Constantinople in 1204 and made it a Latin kingdom that lasted until 1261. While the capturing of Constantinople was not capturing a city from the Muslims, Constantinople was still under the Christian rule that time. Innocent was happy that Constantinople was defeated because it brought the East under his rulership. Remember what we talked about, the Great Schism. In this instance, Innocent III wanting to recover Palestine. Remember Palestine, that's where we have all the holy places, Jerusalem and the rest. But he ended up even capturing, even though he actually did not even reach, he did not make Egypt the base. The military went to Constantinople and captured Constantinople. But for Innocent III, capturing Constantinople and its bishops there, or the head of the Eastern Church, simply made him have more power. He did not end there. He now went against the heretics. Innocent sponsored a crusade against the Albigenses to bring all heretics under the Pope. Innocent III sponsored a crusade under the leadership of Simon de Montfort against the Albigenses of southern France in 1208. Supported by the Dominicans and the Franciscan orders, this crusade exterminated the Albigenses. Now, keep in mind, he is fulfilling his convictions that the Pope is to rule both over the state and over the church universally. As if that's not enough, when he had defeated the heretics, he now went into construction of doctrinal truth. Keep in mind, now that Innocent III had put under his control both the state and the heretics, he turned to the formulation of doctrines that would make papacy even more powerful and have more control. So he called the Fourth Lateran Council, at which meeting these two big decisions were made. Number one, they made annual confession to a priest by all laymen mandatory. It's interesting. If you just flash your memory to the New Testament faith, the confession of sins were to God. The forgiveness of sins were by God. But during the Fourth Lateran Council of 1215, a decision was made to make annual confession to a priest by all laymen mandatory. Then there was a declaration of the doctrine of transubstantiation from this time on. And transubstantiation doctrine simply advocated for the fact that only a priest could administer this sacrament that could allow and or deny a person salvation. Now you remember transubstantiation taught that the substance of bread, that is the bread during the Holy Communion, the substance of bread and wine became the actual body and blood of Christ, even though it appeared the same outward after the words of consecration by a priest. That bread and that wine became the actual blood and body of Christ. Thus, the clergy, who alone could pray for this miracle, had power to give or withhold the life-giving sacraments to lay people. To this day, by the way, this is still sustained as a doctrine in the Catholic Church. Now, does this help you understand why the Pope is the most influential person on earth even today? This is one of the interesting things that history does. It helps us understand. Now, you will, and I hope you find time to read more through history, you will come to understand the Pope was given land, which was a very large territory in the Constantine document, which also was reinforced later. And so from that point of view, the Pope was viewed as one who could own land, control spiritual lives, and hence the kind of authority that the head of the Roman Catholic Church, the historic office of papacy, still carries to this day. I hope this helps you understand why we are where we are, and why, in spite of the Protestants having come up, there's only one who still continues to have that authority: the Pope, or the Bishop of Rome, office of the papacy.